So while people are getting situated, a quick introduction about myself. My name is Ira Winder. I am currently a principal research scientist at Henkaku Center for Radical Transformation. And as a lot of you know, we're founding a new school called the School of Design and Science at Chiba Tech, and I'm going to be an incoming faculty along with 6 other wonderful colleagues and Joey Ito. And my particular expertise is building tools for institutions in particular to enable individual and collective impact and creative anti-disciplinary ways. So we might get into that later. I'm honored today to moderate this conversation with other experts who are building anti-disciplinary institutions in their own way, even if they haven't quite used that word. But in our previous discussions, I think a lot of us share common themes and ideas, and there's a lot to learn from here today. So without further ado, all right, I think Jun Murai, I'd love to introduce you. Maybe not much need for introduction, but you are widely known as the father of the internet in Japan. Somebody also said you're the internet samurai internationally. Basically, you're a pioneering computer scientist who established Japan's first university network in 1984. And you've also founded the WIDE project, a consortia focused on the internet. Currently, you're a senior advanced research project professor at Keio University. And you serve as a special advisor to the Japanese cabinet and the digital agency, where you're shaping digital policy actively. And you're also inducted into the Internet Hall of Fame. Xiao Xiao came here from Paris. Love to have you. You're the director of the Institute for Future Technologies at Da Vinci Higher Education in Paris. And you're a research affiliate at the MIT Media Lab, where you have 3 degrees from MIT. You are a Chinese-American multimedia artist and researcher exploring how technology enhances embodied expressive learning, especially through music. Outside of academia, she's created large-scale interactive installations, and you're a self-taught thereminist. So I hope we get to see that sometime. And you created T-Vox, a singing theremin honored in the 2022 Guthman Musical Instrument Corporation competition. So that's wonderful. Sputniko-san, thank you for joining us. Sputniko is a British-Japanese multimedia artist whose work playfully explores technology, identity, gender, and society, inviting critical reflection on emerging technologies through films, robotics, and interactive installations. Her work has been exhibited all over the world, MoMA Center, Pompidou Metz, Cooper Hewitt, and here in Japan at the Contemporary Art Museum of Tokyo. She's previously founded the group at the MIT Media Lab called Design Fiction, and you've also been at University of Tokyo and Tokyo University of the Arts as a professor. Most recently, you founded Cradle, a company dedicated to supporting women's health and well-being in the workplace, currently serving more than 75 major corporations across Japan. And then last but not least, Jiro. You're a professor emeritus at Keio University, and you're a research professor at the Business Finance Research Center at Waseda University. You're also director of the Digital Co-Creation Research Center at Kyoya University. You have had many distinguished roles over the years, and specifically you helped basically found Keio Research Institute at SOC, and you're the vice president overseeing international collaboration and information infrastructure over the years. You're deeply committed to public service and community engagement, and recently were formally recognized by the Japan's Minister of Internal Affairs. So thank you for all for joining us. So I would like to open our panel with a question to get us started. So this is called Building the Anti-Disciplinary Institution. I'm not sure how much of the audience come here today hearing the word anti-disciplinary before. I don't know what emotions it stirs up in you. Controversy, curiosity, we kind of hope all of the above. But let's start putting a finger on it together. So we kind of explore this term, anti-disciplinary, and I'll start with maybe a basic premise that it could simply mean the idea that meaningful impact can and does occur outside of silos of traditional disciplinary boundaries. And we think that this is worth exploring because, as we saw with our last speaker, there's many cases in the world where the traditional boundaries and silos of the world don't offer the vectors for impact that we might want to see or achieve. So I would like to maybe start with Jun and ask the rest of the panelists the following question. What exactly do we mean by anti-disciplinary?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting question. The anti-disciplinary is kind of fighting against the disciplinary thing. I mean, sounds like. But let me start with my experience about developing the internet, because I've been involved on a day -1 of developing the internet. So it's really the before the internet, right? So everybody thinks about the internet came from the ARPANET, right? But actually, it's not. I mean, ARPANET is a packet switching communication technology, right? So disciplinary-wise, it's a communication technology, ARPANET is. But actually, it's a Unix operating system. It's a computer's new type of operating system embedded in exactly the same time, 1969, starting as a research project. So operating system is one of the computer science disciplinary thing, right? And then those merging together and making the Unix Berkeley software distribution, which is a new type of operating system. But now a computer becomes rather than just the computation, but the help people. So we utilize the writer software by ourselves and running on a Unix operating system, which is now connected around over the internet, right? So the disciplinary thing, starting from communication engineering, computer science, but now people started to utilize. And we are now living on the internet. Therefore, my experience was, seeing people, how people want to try to achieve something, how people want to make their dream come true type of activity on top of the internet. Therefore, now internet development started to work for them, which is a diversity of people, and then whatever the activities they are doing, whatever the process they want to achieve, then we are to help them. So that's very much internet platform development. So to me, it's an anti-disciplinary means. It's a kind of people are free and then doing whatever the things, and this is not a disciplinary, but background might be some of the disciplinary studies, but then it's creating the space for the people to do the activity freely, creative things a lot. That's very much what I've been working on. So anti-disciplinary means seeing the diversity of desire, people, creativity. So that's basically what the anti-disciplinary means to me.
Freedom to express diversity of ideas. I like that.
I love that. I really resonate with that too. And just to add a different perspective to it, for me, I think of anti-disciplinarity and disciplines in general as perhaps related to cultures. So I was born in China, but I moved when I was 8 to the United States, to New Orleans, which has its own culture different from the rest of the United States. And now I live in France. And well, I feel like in every place, so in China, there are certain cultural expectations, in Japan, in the States, in every country, there are these cultural expectations. And I think in every discipline also, there are expectations of how you need to be, how you need to present, what are the values, what you need to pursue. And I think for me, anti-disciplinarity is freeing yourself from that, deciding what you want to do and finding your own center, what's meaningful for you, while sometimes taking inspiration, of course, from what already exists, and also having standards for yourself of something that's for you rigorous and strong, and it's not just doing anything. But at the end of the day, I think it's about having the courage and having kind of the emotional stability even to pursue your own center, pursue what you want to do, and just go with it, express.
Great. Yeah, it's really amazing to hear the ideas from Rai Sensei and Xiao Xiao and myself. And for me, if I talk a little bit about my own background, crossing boundaries and disciplinaries, So Ira did a short intro about my profile, but I started out studying computer science and maths, and then I became an artist. I created works talking about gender, tech, women's health, menstruation issues. And I was fortunate to be able to be showing my works in museums, in galleries, exhibitions. But as time progressed, especially in 2010, the environment became more accessible for people to found their own companies, entrepreneurship, do crowdfunding. And also, I don't know if you heard of the term femtech. It's like a term made from female and technology. So this is a new movement that began in the 2010s, where more women engineers, entrepreneurs appeared, and they started making new products and services to do with like solving women's health issues, like menstruation, menopause, or fertility issues. And that was a really new change that was happening. And as an artist and designer myself, I felt like just showing my work in a museum doesn't feel right when these new real change is happening in society. So it felt really natural for me to do my fundraising, to start my own company, Cradle, that Ira mentioned. So I started a new company to help women's health, work for women working in big corporations in Japan, like Sony, Honda, NEC, or SMBC, big banks. And I think a lot of people in the traditional arts world or design world thought I was a bit crazy because suddenly I'm an entrepreneur, I'm like raising funds, creating a new company. I think some people thought, oh, did she sell her soul to capitalism? Like she's not going to be an artist anymore. She's a businesswoman. But I didn't care because I felt like this is the right thing to do because this is how society and tech situation changing. And I think that's the kind of attitude that Antidisciplinary has, because I think it's very natural that our society is changing all the time. Like I think Murai Sensei's time was the internet, right? Internet, or before that it's computing technology, and now I think that's artificial intelligence. But I think when there's new technology emerging, society changes so much, and I think it's very natural for these traditional disciplinaries and boundaries to overlap, break open, interact with each other. So I think for the institution to be open to that is a very great starting point for more innovations to happen. So that's my view behind that.
Yeah, I love that response and how it touches on maybe one part of antidisciplinary being pragmatism, the willingness to achieve impact working outside of your comfort zone, or maybe in zones that you might be called a sellout for, or but definitely being free to work outside of what role you could be labeled as to achieve your impact.
Hello, I'm Jiro Kokuryo, and I pride myself actually on having done a lot of work on building interdisciplinary
The cousin.
And long story short, I think the work has been about trying to create a common design language that cuts across various disciplines. And if I may borrow Christine's beautiful example of the musical scores and the staff, it's the existence of these 5 lines. I mean, I think you drew 4 lines, but existence of the 5 lines and the equal temperament, that generates lots of infinite combination of different kinds of music. But then Christine also drew an art piece of the lines bending. That puts each note out of the traditional context and probably give different meaning. So we are getting a little closer to a little closer to anti-discipline. And then from Asian background, it's only in the last 200 years that we've been adopting that 5 lines, and then the Asian music had a different set of how sounds can resonate. There we are really talking about anti-disciplinary things, right? So, but the risk of that, of course, is to have create a chaos. That symbols losing meaning. So we want to be very careful about what we are actually trying to do. So.
I love that you brought up models and their role in this process potentially. Like, as a designer and an engineer, I have a very complicated relationship with models because they're very useful when you want to impose maybe a structure and a system onto something, even a complex system. But they are potentially reductionist. They're potentially limiting once you create them. And they can set standards that maybe you didn't intend. So I believe, at a minimum, there needs to be an awareness of models and their role in this process and whether we want to impose them or not. I love that point. So I want to move on to another prompt. And by the way, you might periodically see this code on the screen to submit questions. So if you have questions in mind that you're thinking to submit, please go ahead, and we might get to them towards the end of the event, or this panel in particular. So now that we've kind of defined anti-disciplinary a bit, I think we touched on themes of it's about freedom, it's about stability, it's about focusing on the impact and not necessarily how you get there. You just know you want to achieve impact and you're flexible with the route to it. I think this is a good foundation. And it's ideally, we can all find that in our own way, either personally or through our institutions. But I want to talk about the challenges. Like, what are we up against? What are the blockers to actually having this sort of philosophy in our institutions and maybe in ourselves? But I'd like to focus on our institutions in particular because we're talking about building them. So let's say whether you're creating an anti-disciplinary institution from scratch or you're trying to change the culture of an existing institution, what are the challenges that you've either you've dealt with yourself or that you think are things we should keep in mind?
Okay, so yeah, I was thinking about, listening to the other panelists talking about, and then, so especially everybody knows that the technology is going to be changing, and the new technology coming in, right? And so the Yukichi Fukuzawa actually is a founder of a Keio University. He wrote some books in the 1860s, several books, because he kind of traveling outside the country for the first time, and then they're watching all the technology things like a steam engine and the other things. And then he wrote a book about two major points is really important. The first one is a global space, right? So it's a human being and the planet. That's what he's talking about. So it's not the country, it's not the government, it's not the nation state. It's a global space, right? So which finally been achieved, by the way, by the internet. That's probably the technology. Another thing is that he explicitly said that the new technology would make a kind of a civilization type of a thing, but the people would be confused, afraid of, fear, and the surprise, right? So this is very important point, I believe, that when the disciplinary type of thing is a kind of accumulation of the wisdom in various ways. But the important thing is that our personal, individual, each of us accepted those changes in a different way, right? So it's really important from now that the sensing the individual, how they accept something in a different way. So probably each of us had a different way of accepting some new things, change or whatever, and then understanding that, how each of us feel or afraid of or happy with the new things, and then sharing them going to be a very, very important thing for the whatever the new things happening in a very rapid manner, and then sometimes confusing many people. So I think individual, respecting the individual, how they feel about it, and sharing them is going to be a very important way for the, well, antidisciplinary school, for example.
So it sounds like when we say creating an institution or making an institution more antidisciplinary, you're saying you're actually making people more antidisciplinary. Don't forget that.
Yeah, and respecting
Yeah.
respecting people, individual, your friend. So that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love this. Wow, it's amazing being able to follow and bounce off of what you're saying. So I think maybe to go back to the original question, which is about challenges on an institutional level, I'll start with a little bit of my experiences, but then I want to circle back to this individual level, which I think is what it's about. So I am at Da Vinci Higher Education, which is a private university in France that has 3 different schools: engineering, management, digital design, and I lead this institution that's kind of a sort of pirate ship that's independent from each of the 3 schools and works with all the schools. So some of our students, actually engineering students, are in the audience who are doing internships in Japan. And so, okay, directly answering your question, of course we can talk about the challenges of the parent university being very French and perhaps similar to in Japan, very hierarchical, very into sort of external rankings, into having us translate our goals into, I mean, KPIs are great, but I think it's about, for me, it's more about finding what you want to do that's meaningful first before this like trying to hit external markers of success. So there's all of that, which I'm trying to navigate, but I think actually the most important thing is emotional and psychological, both for our students and also for ourselves. And so I was at the MIT Media Lab before, I'm still affiliated, lots of people here have stepped through the doors there, and I think maybe being at MIT, we're kind of spoiled to be in this environment where everybody around is so creative and kind of already knows what they want, and you just give them a playground and they just make things and run with it. And even if you're maybe a little bit insecure, even maybe you don't think that you're up in the leagues with them, just by being surrounded by people like that, you're kind of inspired to join in too, and you collaborate and you learn so much from your collaborators. But I feel like if you're trying to build an institution like that, actually it's a lot tougher, especially if you're embedded within the culture. And perhaps there are some similarities here between France and Japan, where traditionally it's very disciplinarian, right? Traditionally there are these well-traced paths that people follow to be an engineer, to be a doctor, to be whatever, where there's a high level of training and skill and very well established and very well respected. And we can even say that, let's say, like engineers that come out of the French education system are probably way better at math in the traditional sense than Americans. But on the other hand, there is less encouragement to kind of just explore and do your own thing and find yourselves. And actually one of the big challenges that I've kind of encountered while mentoring our students is actually there's the part that nobody talks about the emotional challenges of, okay, so you give them projects to do that are tied to their passions, but hey, they're so identified and so connected with it that they're terribly afraid of failing because it means like getting stabbed themselves. Or when you're in a situation where you're working with peers, it's great that you work with your friends, but then there's kind of comparison because you're in a system or you've grown up in a system that ranks you based on your classmates, and you can't help but think in that way. And so part of it is like, okay, can we acknowledge these emotional barriers within the students, within the people that we're creating these institutions for, and how do we directly talk about them and kind of mitigate, help people through? And then there's kind of just the personal strategies all of us have to adopt. So earlier when Christine showed the picture, the drawing of the ghost notes, you don't know how smart I am in my language. I so resonated with that because so many times in France, like I have to speak in French in a professional environment, and sometimes it's tough, right? When you are talking to people who are used to talking in a certain language, once again, this disciplinary thing, if you are not completely fluent in their language, then people can kind of, pounce on you, and then here, I think the most important part is just to have confidence, right? But how do you have confidence? And so I think there's a lot of work in this awareness, in meditation practices, but it's also more than that. Like, how do you foster that yourselves if you are trying to lead an anti-disciplinary institution, to kind of embody and to inspire maybe, or just, I don't know, seed a culture of these sorts of considerations?
That's so well said. I'll just have Sputniko follow.
Yeah, so for myself, like, I never had a personal challenge being anti-disciplinary, but I think the challenge was always facing bureaucracy or regulations, rules, and following from Xiao Xiao's experience in France, I think Japan is like one of the most disciplinary, conservative culture organization. I worked in Japanese universities before, so I feel very fortunate to join SDS, which is a very different environment. But that's why I know, Ira, you're the moderator, and I'm supposed to be answering my question. But I'm very curious to ask Murai Sensei and Kokuryo Sensei, yeah. Because Murai Sensei and Kokuryo Sensei, you have founded the SFC, which is for me, feels like a very anti-disciplinary, innovative environment in Japan, in a Japanese university. And I think it's one thing starting it, but for it to continue for over 30 years, that culture is another big thing. And to do that here in Japan, I have so much respect. So I'm curious to ask Murai Sensei and Kokuryo Sensei. I hope I'm not like...
Yeah, I think both of us can talk about, the 3 hours about that.
I'm sure.
But the point is, yes, that was, the Keio University is the oldest university in this country, and so it's a very much a kind of defined side of which is a disciplinary studies already. So in order to challenge that was a very, very difficult and hard. So that needs kind of, did I say 6 hours? But to talk. But anyway, but that was in 1990. Okay, 1990. Remember, when the internet started for the people, it's like a 1995, which is Windows 95 started, and the people understand to utilize the internet. So it's 5 years before that, and then so there are a lot of challenges, but there are many reasons why the people from a different disciplinary. That time, and therefore we talked a lot, discussed a lot, and therefore we could be, kind of achieving what is interdisciplinary, at least, anti-disciplinary or whatever. So that was kind of achieved in a way, but after internet and before internet, that was a big difference. So you are starting in 2026 is totally different from when we started in 1990, which is a very lucky or easier? No, I don't think so. But it's still the different type of challenges. It's going to be waiting for. But I briefly want to touch as Xiao the talk about confident, right? So the individual is going to be confused with the technology, and then different people getting together and then discussing about and try to understand the totally different background or culture, respecting them is not that easy. But at the same time, then you need to each individual needs to have a confidence. Yeah, so this is another challenge. So in the SFC, that was a very, very important thing, that any type of a student, you can do whatever you want, but basically, right? And then you should have a confidence. You love yourself, and that was a very much a message we were creating. So this is very important thing, that the confidence of the individual.
And I think it shows, as I've worked with KO students coming out of SFC, and they definitely are above average confidence, willing to try new things. So there's something going on there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
No, that's a wonderful answer. And maybe
At a very practical level, for example, hiring. Who do you hire? How do you evaluate? Which project you want to fund? I mean, these are the all very, very practical but critical decisions that you have to make. And I think one thing SFC did was to remove that from discipline. Usually, when somebody retires, I retired from KO just a few months ago, people would think, how do you fill the gap? That's not right. I mean, at least not the gap that I created. What's the gap between the present and the future we want to envision? So it has to be a matter of identifying that and trying to identify a person to hire regardless of the discipline, that the person who is the best person to meet the future challenge. But that's, I mean, of course, within any institutions, there will be politics. Mm-hmm. Any institution, I mean, and thank you, Sputniko-san, for the challenge. In some ways, the first generation is easier because you're starting from the scratch. You prove it. But then there will come a time, probably 7-10 years from now, that the people will move out and you have to fill. And that's the timing when the very, very old conservatism start to come in. So you want to have a firm strategy or firm discipline to make sure that you want to maintain yourself as anti-disciplinary.
That's
sort
interesting.
of a paradox, isn't it?
Perhaps, but these ideas of empowering the individual to seek impact, not necessarily say how they do it. You're saying apply that to the hiring process, focus on what these individuals want to do in terms of how they want to change the world, and not necessarily check off the boxes. Are they physicists? Are they proper physicists? Are they proper mathematicians? Things like that. I love that. One challenge I wanted to highlight, and maybe other people have thoughts. We describe disciplinarity as potentially constraining, but there's an obvious benefit to it, and that is the structure for a process to be rigorous within that discipline. And I think that one of the biggest challenges to anti-disciplinary is we're basically taking the guardrails off, which is a lovely idea for confident, competent people. But I still think that when you scale these institutions and ideas, there is that challenge of what does rigor mean in an anti-disciplinary institution? It probably doesn't mean exactly the same thing for the Journal of Physics or something. But what does it mean for anti-disciplinary? Can we hold ourselves to high standards and accountability while still giving ourselves a lot of freedom and support? I could also let that hang. Any responses?
Okay, I can. Kokuryo sensei, you're.
Well, microphone is diffusing.
Oh, okay.
Hello? Okay. Let me borrow this for a while. When the topic of anti-disciplinary came in, I was pondering about what the difference between the Trumpian anti-intellectualism and the anti-disciplinary is. And of course, you want to be free from, I mean, it's about anti-authority, anti-elitism, anti-establishment kind of thing, which is all very good. But of course, that raises the question of where the rigor comes from. And of course, the rigor of science is not to believe in authority, but only believe in logic and evidence. And if you deviate away from that, I think you will lose yourself completely. But then how to verify the evidence, how to make sure that the logic is internally consistent, all these things can be, should be maintained. I argue, I mean, that's the reason why I started my talk by saying that it is about the job is to establish a common design language that cuts across different disciplines, so that these fundamental discipline. If discipline is just about creating villages of sort of closed visitors, yeah, I am all for destroying all of that. But at the same time, we want to maintain our identity as scientists, right? So that's the big challenge.
Yeah, when it's really the disciplinary studies and then keeping the high quality on that particular discipline, then it's always a way to evaluate competition, just grouping the same kind of a work and then competing each other, and then that way quality of the community or that academics is going to be kept. But if you say anti-disciplinary, then you don't use that kind of a method to evaluate the achievement, right? So the important thing is that when somebody is starting something new by the individual desire or dream or whatever, then then achieving it's going to be of course making a progress, and then growing, and then expanding and influencing somebody else. It's not necessarily be creating another discipline thing, right? So it's achievement of the individual, right? So I think that's doable, and that's very much a practical things to do. So for example, the internet, for example, right? Designing the internet, this is no competition, right? We didn't compete with a telephone company, right? Regulations sometimes, but generally, what we wanted to create is a computation platform to help the people's creativity and the global space, type of a thing, which is everything was new, and then utilizing all the things and respecting all the cultures around the world, and then try to make sure that nothing would be destroyed or the discouraged, and so that was a way. But then so no disciplinary thing, but very strong, confident, and then in mind to achieve the whatever you want to achieve, right? So this is to be understood, and to be liked, to be supported, to be endorsed. That will be very important. But it's still very much individual, confident, and efforts, I believe. So that is a little bit different from the existing disciplinary type of academics or the university research type of environment.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, just to jump in, I think on the question of rigor, one of answering the question is like, okay, maybe we care less about form, and actually maybe all we care about is impact of the internet, of the entrepreneurship companies, of even artwork and how it shapes conversations in the world. But I think within an educational context, if you want to teach anti-disciplinarity, it's also useful to kind of adopt ways of thinking to guide people to make sure that they're rigorous through their thinking process. And there, I take a bit of inspiration from human-computer interaction research, which is not anti-disciplinary per se, but I would say it's a very inter- and transdisciplinary research domain, right? There's computer science, there's hardware, there's software, there's psychology, human factor, ergonomics, even art and design, and it kind of combines all of these, and yet you still publish papers and you still get critiqued very harshly by reviewers, and you have to, I think the main thing is showing the right questions that you're asking. Are they precise enough? Are they relevant enough? Then there's articulating your contributions. And then there's kind of taking into account the work that's already been done. And then there's the technical or the design quality of whatever you're presenting. And then there's various sorts of evaluations, whether quantitative or qualitative. So you are kind of cherry picking these different methods, but within research and as a way of teaching, I think it could be a good framework.
Thank you so much. Sputniko.
Yeah, I thought Kokuryo sensei's comparison of Trumpian anti-intellectualism and anti-disciplinary was so genius, so perfect, that it's so hard to add to that, because I so agree with that. Because there is a recent movement of anti-science, anti-medicine, anti-academia happening right now. But I do agree that even though being anti-disciplinary, it doesn't mean disregarding the current disciplinary. And it also means we value logic, science, data. And I think that's a very important point to make, especially now, I think. And I feel like anti-disciplinary, it's not like, I don't think this is something completely new, because I think always, even in the past, these disciplines, when they made great big innovations, I think they were made by researchers, scientists, or artists who were very anti-disciplinary at the time. And then these new innovations turned into this new discipline. So I think in terms of rigor, I can't be that comparison. But anti-disciplinary doesn't mean disrespect for disciplines, disrespect for science, and logic. But I think this is just something very important for us to consider now.
Yeah, that's, when the internet started a long time ago, then the Iran government created the government-sponsored TV program called the culture would be kind of would be identical if internet is deployed. So because it's the same single space and then it's the same language, so each of the culture is going to be a kind of decreased and to be identical. Then I was the only one that no, internet empowered the culture. So I was invited to the TV program about that subject. So result, everybody knows. Right? Okay. And so we are respecting the diversity, culture, and the disciplinary. But there's still kind of a lot of new things are happening, and probably it's a more stronger individual, and then so creating the innovative new things. So in that sense, I'm a little bit optimistic about that kind of thing.
So I'm sorry to start winding down the session, but do we have time for one question? Yes, one question. So thank you to Ben Weber, who submitted. An anti-disciplinary org very quickly becomes its own discipline as relationships develop across traditional boundaries. How should orgs continually shake it up? It's a very good question. In fact, the model of disciplinarity, like where did disciplines come from? Well, once they were baby anti-disciplines, maybe, that coalesced. But so yeah, what do our colleagues think of this? Like, how do you shake things up, maybe at KO or at your own institutions?
I think senpai, KO senpai, you have experience.
Recognize, reward, feedback, hire.
I see. Show me the incentive, you'll see the solution. Is that philosophy? I see.
Yeah, just again, Yeah, understanding, respecting, and then also the very much, the communication rely on the friends, the group. That was a very, very effective way we have achieved. And so, kind of respecting the diversity in the group or team or whatever, then sharing your idea. So I'm pretty much confident with that kind of a model. That would be
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more questions, but luckily we're a pretty cozy group today, and our speakers are going to be around all day. So please, I'm sure they'd love to talk to you. Anyway, I want to thank you again so much. This is a really exciting panel because, as you know, a lot of our co-faculty, these founding faculty of the School of Design and Science, there's 7 to 8 of us, we're all thinking about this actively. The school is still in a molten form. So I think this is a particularly good time to have this sort of panel because our ideas and debates are ongoing. So, and for instance, we have our own very traditional institution, perhaps Chiba Tech, very old, that we're working with to implement this idea. So there's lessons there. With regard to impact, we're already discussing ideas like, well, can students get credits for their degree by building a startup, by having art exhibitions? So things outside of like traditional paper publication. Yet trying to do it in a rigorous way at the same time. So thank you again. I think before I have our panelists depart from the stage, I have a couple announcements. So we're going to have a 15-minute break, and we're going to come back. Sorry? 23-minute break. Okay, you get bonus time. But the special thing about this break is I want to start onboarding you about the idea of an unconference. Has anybody here done an unconference before? I've done this at the Media Lab back in the day, and I think Xiao Xiao has probably done these. But the idea is, as audience members, we have space during the day to hold your own mini conferences, your own sessions based on what you are bringing to this conference. So essentially, we have a space in the corner called the Unconference Corner where you can submit your ideas for little discussions or meetings you can have later today. And what people do is they'll come by during the day and maybe see what you've written and put a sticker to vote on it or participate. So I think there's more explanation over there in the corner for how to create these unconference sessions and get people to attend if you want. All right. I believe that will let us wrap it up. Thank you so much. We'll see you at 11.